Welcome, AP Economics students. Today is the day 5 of review, which is our first day of microeconomics review. This review doesn't seem so intense because it was relatively not that long ago, especially when you compare it to macroeconomics, which was literally the last calendar year. So, day 5, and excuse my allergies, by the way. Day 5 is all about Unit 8 and Unit 9. Unit 8 is called Behind the Demand Curve. That kind of looks at the consumer perspective. And Unit 9 is called Behind the Supply Curve. That takes a look at the producer's perspective, our introduction to costs, and that important information. What is extraordinarily important to understand from this section is this graphic that I got from your Krugman textbook. For Unit 8, these are all the different elasticities. Price elasticity of demand, cross price elasticity of demand, income elasticity of demand, and price elasticity of supply. Especially the first three help us hone in on the consumer's perspective. So the formulas are there for the percent change, and then also the evaluations that you can make once you determine the value using the formulas. So I would definitely have that, close by, near me, downloaded, printed out, or just download it on another device so that you can reference this during the microeconomics exam. Price elasticity of demand. This tells us how sensitive is price change to a good. Okay, so we know that in the law of demand, as price goes up, quantity demanded goes down. Price elasticity of demand tells us how much it's going to go down, how quickly it's going to go down. And we can make some determinations about what type of good or what type of pricing we're looking at. That's the most popular. Price elasticity of demand. Definitely make sure you know that. A second type of elasticity of demand is cross price elasticity of demand. And what cross price elasticity of demand shows us is the relationship that one good has with another. Are these goods substitutes? Are these goods complements? Or are they completely unrelated? So when you take a look at cross price elasticity of demand, when you get a negative number, that means that they are complements, tennis balls and tennis rackets. When you get a positive number, it's two competing products like Nike sneakers and Adidas. So that's something that we can learn. What I said in class is that for price elasticity of demand and for price elasticity of supply, the number matters, the value matters, not positive or negative. When you're talking about cross price elasticity of demand and income elasticity of demand, the number doesn't matter so much, but what does matter is the positive or negative. Okay, so an income elasticity of demand, if you have something that is negative, that means that it is inferior good. If you have a situation where it's positive, that means that it's a normal good. And then you can apply, if you want to look at the values in terms of the elasticity of demand, anything that's 0 is perfectly inelastic. Anything between 0 and 1 obviously is relatively inelastic. Exactly 1 is uninelastic, and greater than 1 is elastic. Okay. Price elasticity of supply follows the same rules as price elasticity of demand. It just takes a look at that different perspective. Okay. Couple of other things that you should be aware of for Unit 8. Here's your regular supply and demand curve. We know that if I were to draw a triangle from PE to E to this top point here, That would be my consumer surplus. And a essential concept that you need to know is that when taxes are applied to a particular item, they reduce consumer surplus and producer surplus. And right here, we have what's represented by the tax. And right here, we have dead weight loss. And if you remember, dead weight loss, very important concept for you to be aware of. That is economic activity that you wanted to happen that just couldn't happen. Okay, so that's that situation. Then we have some key confusing concepts here. The substitution effect comes from a change in the price of one good relative to the price of another good. When you're talking about income effect, that's talking about purchasing power. So if they're to ask you a question, I'm not sure how they would word that in a free response, but that's just something that you should be aware of. Total revenue and price move in the same direction, then it's inelastic. If total revenue and price move in the opposite direction, it's elastic. So this is another way to pretty much figure out price elasticity of demand is by doing the total revenue test. Wouldn't be surprised if there was a multiple choice question like that. Um, Anything that prevents the sale of the unit that would have occurred in the market equilibrium reduces the total surplus. And you can also say in that situation, it creates dead weight loss. When we are thinking about as a consumer's perspective, this is something that's big, and you'll see it in the free response question that I'm about to show you. Whether a consumer should buy something, one more good or not, depends on marginal. There's that key word, marginal, which we see throughout microeconomics, which means one more. Um, so we look at the marginal utility per dollar. And seeing, okay, how can I maximize my utility with the cheapest amount of cost? Unless they cause a firm to shut down, lump sum taxes do not affect price or quality, or it should say quantity, not quality. So there is no dead weight loss there. So just be aware of lump sum taxes and then excise tax or per unit tax. And be prepared to take a look at, again, you're not going to be drawing graphs, but you will have to explain where a dead weight loss would be and why it would occur. This is Unit 9, essentially. So, Unit 9, and for the rest of microeconomics, I said this so many times in class that if you don't remember this, you just weren't listening. This is the most important rule. I told you that knucklehead that I went to college was able to pass microeconomics because she remembered this rule. MR equals MC. And if you kind of stick with that and you start with that, it's a great place to start. It's a great place to think when you're thinking about anything, pretty much Unit 9 and above. So Unit 9 is going to be all about the producer's perspective. Unit 10, we're going to be talking about market structures. And it's even used in Unit 11 when looking at individual factor markets. So make sure that you understand all of these terms. You might need to explain how a marginal cost curve, what it looks like, what an ATC looks like, what the relationship between the ATC and the AVC would be, what the AFC would be like. So definitely understand the construction, be able to say it in a sentence. Remember, we have a big gap in between the ATC and the AVC at low levels, and that becomes smaller at high levels of quantity because this is distributing those average fixed costs. The marginal cost curve is always going through the bottom of the AVC and it's always going through the bottom of the ATC. Make sure you understand the difference between explicit and implicit costs. Make sure that you apply that concept to accounting profit versus economic profit. Accounting profit just cares about filing your taxes for the year. They care about your explicit costs. What did you pay for labor? What did you pay for capital? What did you pay for land? Implicit costs, remember, are those opportunity costs. Okay, I leave teaching to go and to open up my own t-shirt store. Part of the implicit cost that an economist cares about, that's economic profit, is both economic profit is both explicit and implicit, is not only do I care about all my explicit costs, but my implicit cost. I gave up a job at teaching to go and open this t-shirt shop. So an economist is going to evaluate your decision a little more comprehensively. We have a situation called normal profit, that's break even, breaking point, that kind of thing. It's all the same thing. It just depends on which book you're looking at. We have this idea of marginal analysis. Again, one more, diminishing returns. We're going to be using that word obviously throughout microeconomics, and to know the difference between fixed and variable costs. Those measurements and those definitions are a nice little cheat sheet here. So I definitely recommend doing that. Okay. The big key concept that a lot of people screw up: in the long run, all inputs are variable. In the short run, if you have a lease for a building that you're using as a storefront, generally that lease is for a year. After that year is up, that cost now becomes variable. It was a fixed cost paying that lease in the short run, but in the long run, it's variable because you can change it. Okay. The marginal product of labor typically falls as more workers are hired, because when you have more workers, there's production that's limited for a variety of reasons. You might only have, if I'm opening a pizza kitchen, I'm not just going to keep hiring workers. I only have a certain amount of ovens that the workers could use. I only have a certain amount of tables that needed to be waited on, et cetera, et cetera. And just the other key confusing concept, you're not going to need to draw them, but you are going to need to explain them, is make sure that you have the explain marginal cost goes through the bottom of ATC and AVC. Here's our big long run. So this big U is your long run average total cost curve, and it's the average total cost curves kind of over time. This, when the long run costs are going down, we're experiencing economies of scale. When long run costs start to go up, we're experiencing diseconomies of scale. Okay, here is a free response question that I found in the past that might be similar to something that you do on the actual test. Sasha is a utility maximizing consumer who spends all of her income on peanuts and bananas, both of which are normal goods. Assume that the last unit of peanuts consumed increased Sasha's total utility from 40 to 48, and that the last unit of bananas consumed increased her utility from 52 to 56. So remember, utility is kind of this weird, like cerebral thing that's it's like a made up, like scoreboard, if you will, that's in our head. And the higher the score, which the score would be the utility, the happier and the more satisfied that we are. If the price of the unit of peanuts is $1, and Sasha is maximizing her utility, calculate the price of the bananas. So when we include this formula, we are just taking a look at the difference in the utility, because these things are they're set in a what should I call it? Uh, in like two data sets kind of set together. So I can't think of the word right now, but if you subtract 48 minus 40, you get 8. 56 minus 52, you get 4. So how we can compare this is 4 over 8, and that's going to be 50 cents. It's a ratio that you cross multiply. I can't think of the name right now. So we have it as 50 cents. So we know that if the price of the unit of peanuts increases and the price of the unit of bananas remains unchanged from the price that you determined in Part A, Part 1, how will Sasha's purchases of peanuts change? They're going to decrease because bananas are cheaper, and she can increase her utility through bananas. So if peanuts gets, becomes more expensive, she's going to jump into that. So that's the utility that we're taking a look at there. Letter B, assume that the cross price elasticity of demand between peanuts and bananas is positive. A widespread disease has destroyed the banana crop. What will happen to the equilibrium price and quantity of peanuts in the short run? So Because we are told that it is positive, we know that they are substitutes. And because they are substitutes, if you have a situation where the a disease destroyed the banana crop, the supply of bananas, so if you have two different supply and demand curves, one for bananas, one for peanuts, the supply of bananas is going to decrease, which means that price is going to go up. And if price is going to go up, what that means is that the equilibrium price and quantity of peanuts is going to go up. The demand for peanuts is going to go up because they are a cheaper price. Since the supply decreased in bananas, supply increases the price of bananas. Since they're substitutes, when price goes up for bananas, that means that quantity demanded for peanuts is going to go up. That's a positive relationship. They go in the same direction. If the cross price elasticity of demand was, say, negative, when price of bananas goes up and then peanuts demand for peanuts goes down, well, then we would say that they were complements, that you eat them together. That's because the price of bananas goes up and I eat them together, I'm not going to get a peanut because I usually eat them together. But that's not what's going on in this question. In this question, they're positive, which represents that they are substitutes. Now, last part, assume that the price of bananas increases. Will the substitution effect increase, decrease, or have no effect on the quantity of bananas demanded? So, what we need to say there is the substitution effect causes the quantity of bananas demanded to decrease. Um, and if you take a look at Sasha's real income, her real income will decrease. Her real income is based on how many bananas could I buy before this situation and how many bananas can I buy today. Since the price has gone up, she can buy less bananas today. That means that her real income goes down. And the reason why is because of this substitution effect, because peanuts are available. Okay, so this is just a short question, kind of trying to go over a little bit about utility, a little bit about elasticity. So let's make sure that we do some of this practice, and I hope that you have a great rest of your day. Talk to you soon.